welcome to Father and Son, and welcome to you, Tom, on a very, very cold day.
Morning, Dad. Yes, it's been one of the coldest starts to winters we've seen, or to winter we've seen in years and years and years. Around Melbourne, they're expecting snow down to 500 metres.
This long weekend in June, everybody will be able to go skiing, eh?
Yes, this will be one of the few Queen's birthday weekends where the ski season actually starts with snow. So, I don't know what to make of all the global warming talk, but it is extraordinarily cold in the southern part of Australia.
It's not too cold in Afghanistan because we've lost another soldier. That's 4 in 3 weeks. I think it's time for the Liberal Party, and I'm going to lobby them, to say, right, let's get out of here. I think that we're losing too many good lives, and it's only the start of the season. Summer's only just approaching.
The thing is, and I've been saying on these videos for ages that Afghanistan's a pointless war, but to be honest, just because we lose a few soldiers is not the reason to pull out. I mean, whenever you commit to conflict, you have to expect that you are going to suffer casualties, be they deaths or wounds.
Yeah, but it's unwinnable, I think.
Well, of course it's unwinnable, but I mean, just because someone has died is not the reason we should be pulling out. We should be pulling out because there's no point to it any longer. And look, from what I saw in the New York Times this morning, President Obama is under considerable pressure by both military and political leaders to say, look, Osama bin Laden is dead. There's no credible terrorist threat coming out of Afghanistan anymore. As a result, there's no reason for the US to be there. And I think the Americans will accelerate their troop withdrawals, and as a result, Australia should do the same.
Well, we'll obviously follow whatever the Americans do. That's the only reason we're there, to keep strong the alliance we've got with the United States.
Well, I just hope the public starts looking at this and saying to parliamentarians, to their local MPs, look, just explain to us what the threat is, because if we're just there fighting for democracy in Afghanistan, to me that doesn't seem a particularly good thing to be doing. Anyway, it's tragic news for the families involved, and I guess the hardest thing about pulling out of a conflict is for those who have fallen, their families say, well, what was the point of all this? And the answer is possibly there isn't one.
That's usually always the case when there's war. All right, what else do you got to talk about?
Well, the sporting world's interesting. The AFL, despite its massive success, I mean, financially they got a record amount of money for their TV rights. Some clubs are still struggling quite dramatically. Now, a week ago we saw that Port Adelaide essentially is insolvent. It's still owned by the SANFL, as are the Adelaide Crows. And what we said this morning in Melbourne's Herald Sun is that there is something of a coup going on at the Western Bulldogs, formerly Footscray, where
that's overperformance, though, not so much money. I think Smorgan's done quite a good job turning their finances around. They've still got $4 million of debt out there, I read this morning, and he's upset because they're going to have a coup against him. Well, that's football.
It's amazing how, it's not really amazing, I'm being sarcastic, if you're winning, everybody's happy. If you're losing, there's all this grumbling and discontent. One of the things people forget about football, though, Dad, is that, and you know this, it is a zero-sum game. That is, like every year I listen to, pre the football season starting, if you listen to all the shows on various radio stations like SEN and 3AW, anybody rings up and says, how's my club's going to go? They'll say, oh, well, it'll probably do better this year. Well, you know what? If there's 16 teams in the competition, 8 of them can only do better if another 8 do worse. And sometimes you have to admit that the clubs, by definition, some clubs have to do worse than the previous year, but no one ever seems to accept that.
No, normally when you do a survey, and I've done it a few times for both my television show, you ask people before the season who's going to play off in the grand final, and they invariably say the two that played off last year look to be the best.
Yes, and of course, if we've always followed that logic, you'd have the same 2 teams playing every year.
It never happens.
Funny enough, as a former statistician, and that's what I studied, the team most likely...
Where did you study that?
I did that throughout Melbourne University and at Oxford. It was one of the consistent subjects I did was statistics. It only taught me to realise that statistics is an inherently useless science. But I would say this, if you had to pick, before a season, what team is most likely to drop, the obvious answer is the winner from the previous year. Because the winner from the previous year cannot go up. All they can do is stay the same, which is very hard to do, or as we know generally, go down. Yet that is counterintuitive for most people.
It is. It is. Anyway, that's getting exciting. The Blues are going very well. I think the top 4 is set already. Collingwood, Geelong, Hawthorn, Carlton. Hard to see anybody else. Maybe West Coast are on the improve. They might get there. Hawthorn came back from the jaws of defeat, captured a great victory last week, and Carlton played well in the second half. Political front, you were watching Q&A and they got stuck into the Mr Abbott.
Well, it was very funny Q&A. They obviously have questions that come from the audience, questions that people put up to tweets or from Twitter, and every now and then a video question. And they said it was from someone, but instead it was just a video of Tony Abbott 2 years ago in 2009, who appeared to be supporting a carbon tax and saying this is how it would work, and surely that would be the simplest way to reduce CO2 emissions. And it made the Liberal representative on the panel, who was Christopher Pyne, look very, very uncomfortable. I think the reality is that the public does not buy a carbon tax, whether it's being argued by the Liberal coalition or whether it's argued by the Labor Party, and that's reflected in the polls. And you just see that Bob Catter during the week, the madman from northern Queensland,
going to set up his own party.
Set up a new party. Now, it's funny, he said he wants to be a democratic party where people can have their own beliefs. But then he set out a list of things that you had to believe in order to be a member of the party. So, you know, like all those things, it will probably survive for a few years, but like Pauline Hanson did, and then just disappear. Just go back to football for a second. There was another issue over the weekend that I think reared its ugly head, and that was racism. Now, there was
but they made it's a mountain out of a molehill. It was one guy at a VFL game.
That's true. There was another incident. There was another incident at the Collingwood game, which hasn't been confirmed to have been racist, but I suspect it was. And in fact, the Collingwood president, Eddie Maguire, took it upon himself to demonstrate with his supporter, who I think was yelling racist insults at one of the Aboriginal Collingwood players. I briefly met he's a North Melbourne recruit, Majak Dor, obviously of Sudanese origin. Yesterday, and he was quite upset by what happened at the VFL game on the weekends. In your day, Dad, no one would have worried about it.
No, it's terrible.
20 years ago, Tony Shaw said that you say and do whatever it takes to win, but I think these days things have changed a bit.
There's some shocking things said on the football field when I played. So we had to give and take. We gave a bit as well.
Yeah, I think it was more difficult though. If you were an Aboriginal player back then, you would have had to have taken a lot, but I reckon it was hard to give, and I think that's changing now. I think the
champion St Kilda player was the first one.
Nicky Winmar.
Yeah, and he held up his jacket and pointed to his
someone said that process was started earlier by Polly Farmer, who just by virtue of being a brilliant player sort of did a lot for Aboriginals. And of course the Cracker Brothers in the 70s and the 80s.
City Jackson in the 60s.
Yeah, so anyway, I think it's something I'd like to see stamped out of the game, and I think the AFL is doing the right thing.
Well, they've been doing it for some time, and I think it has basically gone. Very difficult to stop supporters from saying.
Well, they're doing it. I mean, they're identifying people and they're picking them out and saying you can't come back to watch games. I think that's a good thing. Now, finally, the Reserve Bank is meeting today. Now, I think rates are going to stay on hold.
They have to.
Well, you think they'd have to, but I'll tell you what, the people at the Reserve Bank are obsessed with inflation. They're obsessed with, like that is their only focus in life, and they're given one weapon to control them, and that's interest rates. So I'm still very worried there will be another rate rise in the next couple of months and possibly two.
Well, you've got a couple of factors mitigating against that. One, your retail sales are very slow. Two, the Australian dollar is exceptionally high, which means all the imports are coming into this country cheaper. I think the inflationary blip we got was probably caused partly by the flooding and the storms we had in Queensland. Put the vegetable prices up significantly.
That's right, and hopefully that has all stopped. But I'm just saying, let's just say there's something else that's inflationary. Who knows? But look, I spoke to someone in the motor trade last night, and he said that things are very, very quiet. No one is buying cars. I would suggest that in the absence of the mining boom in certain parts of the country,
we
would be in recession, and that will make life quite difficult for people.
Well, if anybody from the Reserve Bank watches this show, don't put up interest rates. They're inflationary in themselves.
Well, that's right. I mean, people forget that they put up interest rates, and that feeds through to people's mortgages. But they then conveniently eliminate interest rates from their calculation of inflation. It's very bad.
Righto, that's it for this week. Hopefully it might be a bit warmer, and enjoy the long weekend. And if you go skiing, you might even have some snow.
And God save the Queen.